American law enforcement has sometimes crossed into the realm of pure theater. We are counting down the 33 most absurd police stings ever conducted on United States soil, operations so bizarre they seem like fiction. You will discover the strange logic behind elaborate deceptions involving fake universities, phantom Ferraris, and undercover ice cream trucks. How did a sheriff's department justify creating a pirate radio station? And why did federal agents spend years running a Texas strip club? By the end of this journey, you will have a complete picture of the most bewildering tactics in modern policing. What does it say about justice when the methods used to enforce it become this strange? Our journey into the bizarre begins not on a dark street corner, but in the warm, turquoise waters of the Florida Keys. Here, the state's Fish and Wildlife Commission launched an undercover operation so peculiar it raises fundamental questions about the cost of justice. They called it Operation Freezer Burn. For months, undercover officers posed as eager buyers, seeking out fishermen willing to sell spiny lobsters caught out of season or over the legal limit. The goal was to protect a valuable marine resource, but the execution quickly spiraled into the absurd. Officers spent thousands of dollars in public funds on the elaborate charade, purchasing the illegally caught crustaceans to build their cases. When the final net was cast, dozens of fishermen found themselves facing serious charges. Yet the ultimate irony was in the math. The total market value of all the lobsters seized in the entire, lengthy operation was calculated to be around $26,000. The cost to taxpayers to run the sting, however, soared past $300,000. That is more than 10 times the value of the lobsters themselves. This wasn't just a police action, it was a spectacularly unbalanced transaction. The state spent a fortune to prove a point, creating a paradox where the pursuit of justice seemed to wildly outweigh the crime. While Florida was spending a fortune on lobsters, federal agents were orchestrating a performance with a much higher budget and far flashier props. The stage was West Palm Beach, and the centerpiece was a fleet of luxury cars that did not actually exist. The Federal Bureau of Investigation created an entire, fully operational fake luxury car dealership, a multi-million-dollar illusion designed to tempt corrupt professionals. They called it the Esquire Sports Car Corporation, a showroom filled with exotic vehicles like Ferraris and Lamborghinis, all meticulously staged to project an image of immense wealth. The targets were not typical criminals, but bankers and lawyers whom agents suspected were already involved in money laundering. The undercover agents played their parts as high-rolling car dealers with access to limitless cash, openly discussing how they needed to move dirty money. They offered irresistible deals on dream cars, proposing to over-invoice the purchases so the targets could funnel their illicit funds through what seemed like a legitimate business transaction. For months, the sting ran, complete with hidden cameras and wiretaps capturing every handshake and whispered conversation. The operation successfully netted several convictions, but it also ignited a fierce legal and ethical firestorm. Defense attorneys argued this was not a passive investigation, but an active manufacturing of crime. They claimed their clients were presented with a temptation so elaborate, so perfectly tailored to their weaknesses that it crossed the line into entrapment. The line between catching a criminal in the act and creating one for the sake of an arrest became dangerously blurred inside that glamorous showroom. Was this a masterful takedown of corrupt elites, or a case of the government writing the script for a crime and then arresting the actors it had hired? This high-stakes world of phantom Ferraris gives way to a different kind of deception, one set in the quiet halls of academia. In California, a police department constructed an entire institution of higher learning from pure fiction. They named it the University of Northern New Jersey, a school that existed only on paper and in the digital realm. Its official-looking website featured a detailed course catalog, a list of distinguished faculty, and even a noble-sounding motto. But every element was a carefully designed lure. The target was foreign students suspected of using fraudulent means to maintain their student visas in the United States. Undercover officers, playing the roles of university administrators, openly advertised that their school required no classes, no exams, and no attendance. It was a paper mill for visas, and they were the suppliers. The offer was irresistible to those desperate to stay in the country, and hundreds of students took the bait, enrolling and paying tuition to this ghost university. When the operation concluded, the arrests were swift and widespread. Yet the victory was immediately shadowed by controversy. Critics asked a difficult question. Was this a legitimate crackdown on immigration fraud, or were law enforcement officials exploiting the fears and vulnerabilities of a specific population? These students were not violent criminals, but individuals caught in a complex system, and the police had created the very crime they then punished. The sting successfully exposed a loophole in the immigration system, but it also exposed a moral dilemma about the role of police as both investigator and instigator. How far should the law go to prove a person's willingness to break it? Yet even a fake university has a veneer of official legitimacy. The next sting removed that pretense entirely, turning crime fighting into a form of prime-time entertainment. The most famous of these operations was the television series To Catch a Predator, a program built on a direct partnership between local police and a news organization. The concept was simple and sensational. Volunteers working with the show's producers would pose as minors in online chat rooms. They would engage in explicit conversations with adults, eventually luring them to a sting house under the guise of a meeting with a child. The entire encounter, from the moment the individual arrived to the moment of their arrest by waiting officers, was broadcast on national television for millions of viewers. The dramatic confrontations hosted by a journalist became a cultural phenomenon, celebrated by many as a public service, but behind the sensational footage lay a deeply troubled legal reality. Defense attorneys argued that the entire process was engineered for ratings, creating an environment of extreme pressure and entrapment. They pointed to the aggressive, suggestive language used by the decoys, who often initiated the illicit conversations and persistently encouraged the targets to visit the house. The presence of television cameras, they claimed, compromised the integrity of the police investigation, pushing officers to make arrests that might not have held up in a more traditional, by-the-book sting. This fusion of law enforcement and entertainment created a perfect storm of ethical dilemmas. In several high-profile cases, charges were dismissed or convictions overturned because of the questionable methods used. The spectacle of public shaming often overshadowed the pursuit of due process, raising a disturbing question. Was the primary goal to protect children or to generate compelling television drama? The line between justice and performance had never been so dangerously thin. Sometimes the most elaborate stings are aimed at the smallest of crimes. In one American city, police designed a trap so simple and so tempting it seemed almost like a social experiment. They installed a vending machine in a known high-crime neighborhood, but this was no ordinary machine. It was a decoy deliberately designed to be easily broken into. The front panel was fragile, the lock was weak, and the interior was stocked with snacks and a small amount of cash. The entire setup was a carefully engineered lure, waiting for someone to take the bait. For the police, it was a straightforward numbers game. They would simply watch and wait, making arrests for criminal mischief and petty theft as they occurred. And occur they did. The machine was broken into repeatedly, leading to multiple arrests for what amounted to a few dollars in snacks. On the surface, it was a success. But the operation begged a much larger question about the priorities of modern policing. Here was a significant investment of time, manpower, and equipment, all dedicated to catching individuals committing a low-level, non-violent offense. Critics argued that this was not proactive policing, but the creation of a crime magnet. by placing a uniquely vulnerable target in a struggling area were officers preventing crime or manufacturing it for the sake of easy statistics. The ethical dilemma was profound. The sting did not target a specific known criminal. Instead, it presented a universal temptation, testing the will of every passerby on a bad day. It forced a community already strained by poverty and a lack of resources to face a test devised by the very people meant to protect them. Was catching a handful of people for minor theft worth the erosion of trust? And did this clever trap ultimately serve justice, or did it merely prove that anyone can be tempted when the opportunity is perfectly engineered? Financial desperation can be a far more powerful lure than any luxury car or fake university. This truth became the central engine of a sting that saw police officers themselves become the loan sharks. In a struggling community, undercover agents set up shop, openly offering high-interest, illegal loans to anyone who walked in. They advertised their services as a quick, no-questions-asked solution for people in a bind, fully aware that their clients were likely facing eviction, mounting medical bills, or the threat of having their car repossessed. The targets were not organized crime figures, but ordinary citizens pushed to the financial brink. One by one, they came to the undercover officers seeking a lifeline. And one by one, they were arrested for seeking out an illegal loan. The police department hailed the operation as a success, arguing they were disrupting a black market that often preys on the vulnerable. But the moral calculus here is deeply unsettling. The police did not infiltrate an existing criminal lending ring. Instead, they created the entire enterprise from nothing, manufacturing both the supply and the demand for a crime that would not have existed without their direct instigation. They were not catching predatory lenders, they were becoming the predatory lenders, then punishing the very people who fell for the trap. This raises a profound ethical question. When law enforcement actively cultivates crime by exploiting human vulnerability, are they protecting the public or simply creating new criminals out of people at their most desperate moment? The line between a sting and a form of state-sponsored entrapment becomes terrifyingly thin when the bait is a person's last hope. The idea of police becoming loan sharks to trap the desperate is unsettling enough. But what happens when law enforcement decides to dabble in seasonal entertainment? In one community, officers constructed an elaborate fake haunted house, a rickety structure designed not to scare patrons but to tempt criminals. This was not a community event. It was a carefully planned trap, a decoy business made to look like an easy target for burglars. The police advertised its grand opening, complete with cheap props and intentionally flimsy locks on the doors and windows. They even stocked it with what appeared to be valuable electronics and cash, all under constant surveillance. The plan was to wait for thieves to take the bait, breaking into the phantom attraction. And it worked. Several individuals were arrested for attempting to burglarize the empty haunted house. The police department defended the operation as a clever way to proactively catch criminals who were already active in the area. Yet the timing of the sting sparked immediate controversy. This elaborate production was launched in the weeks leading up to Halloween, a period when real public safety concerns are typically at a peak. Officers were tied up for weeks, monitoring an empty building instead of patrolling neighborhoods filled with actual children trick-or-treating. Critics asked a simple but damning question. Were the resources spent on building and guarding a fake crime seen the best use of public funds during a time of heightened community need? The operation successfully caught a handful of burglars, but at what opportunity cost? It presented a bizarre spectacle of police prioritizing the creation of a fictional crime over addressing the very real and seasonal demands for public safety. The haunting of a fake holiday attraction reveals a deep temptation for police to create crime where none exists, but the next sting on our list weaponized a symbol of childhood innocence itself. A police department decided that the most effective way to surveil a neighborhood for drug activity was to operate a fully functional ice cream truck. This was not a simple, unmarked van. It was a classic, brightly colored truck, complete with cheerful music chiming from its loudspeaker, a menu of frozen treats, and an undercover officer serving actual ice cream to real children. The entire operation was a meticulously crafted deception, using kids as unwitting props in a dangerous adult game. As children lined up for cones and popsicles, the undercover officer inside was not just a vendor. He was watching, listening, and gathering intelligence on suspected drug deals happening in the surrounding area. The truck's innocent exterior concealed surveillance equipment, and every sale to a child provided cover for the officer's true mission. When the operation concluded, the department boasted of multiple drug arrests, framing it as a clever and innovative tactic. The immediate public backlash, however, was fierce and deeply emotional. Parents were horrified to learn that their local police had deliberately used their children as camouflage. The sound of the ice cream truck's jingle, a universal signal of summer joy, had been twisted into a police siren. Community trust, a fragile asset in any neighborhood, evaporated overnight. How could parents ever feel safe letting their kids run toward that familiar music again, when it might be a police surveillance operation targeting their own community? The sting successfully netted some low-level drug arrests, but at what profound cost? It forced a difficult question about the boundaries of ethical policing. Is any arrest worth shattering a fundamental symbol of childhood trust, and should the law ever disguise itself as a source of joy to ensnare its targets? The transformation of police into ice cream vendors pales in comparison to the federal government's most audacious undercover venture. For years, agents did not just infiltrate a business, they became its full-time proprietors, operating a vibrant Texas strip club they named the Eagle's Nest. This was not a brief, covert observation. It was a sprawling, multi-million-dollar enterprise funded by taxpayers where federal agents managed dancers, paid the bills, and served drinks, all in the name of investigating money laundering. The club was a real, functioning business, open to the public and buzzing with nightly activity. Undercover agents playing the roles of managers and bartenders worked to befriend their targets, hoping to uncover evidence that cartel money was being washed through the establishment. Yet as the months stretched into years, the operation's colossal scale began to raise alarming questions. The government spent millions of dollars to keep the lights on, the music playing, and the alcohol flowing. They were, in effect, running a lucrative adult entertainment business for years, generating its own substantial income. When the operation finally concluded, the legal payoff was shockingly meager. The massive investment and years of work resulted in only a handful of convictions, none of which were the high-level cartel figures initially promised. Critics were swift and brutal in their assessment. This was not a precise surgical strike against organized crime, but a blundering, expensive fantasy. The government had crossed a line from investigator into active participant, creating a sustained criminal enterprise of its own to chase the ghosts of one. The Eagle's Nest sting forces us to confront a deeply troubling reality. When the government itself becomes the proprietor of a vice business for years on end, who exactly is policing the police, and at what point does the pursuit of crime simply become a crime in itself? The spectacle of federal agents running a strip club reveals a fascination with elaborate undercover work, but some stings have fixated on crimes of almost laughable pettiness. One police department decided to wage a technological war against parking meter thieves. They installed special meters in targeted areas, but these were no ordinary coin collectors. They were sophisticated traps, each one a small electronic snare designed to catch anyone foolish enough to reach for a few quarters. The meters were booby-trapped with sensors that could detect the specific motion of a hand fishing inside the coin slot. The moment a theft was detected, a silent alarm would alert a nearby surveillance team, who would then swoop in to make an arrest for the theft of what often amounted to less than $1. The police argued this was a smart, efficient use of modern technology to combat a persistent nuisance crime. They saw it as a direct strike against the low-level disorder that can, in theory, encourage more serious offenses. Yet the sheer imbalance of the operation was staggering. Consider the resources deployed. A team of trained officers, equipped with advanced surveillance gear and communications equipment, sat waiting in vans for hours, their entire attention focused on a single parking meter. The cost of their salaries, the technology in the meters, and the fuel for the surveillance vehicles undoubtedly ran into thousands of dollars for each shift. All of this was mobilized to apprehend individuals for stealing coins that might not even buy a cup of coffee. This creates a baffling cost-benefit paradox. The city was spending a fortune in public funds to protect a tiny stream of revenue, an equation that makes no financial sense whatsoever. Beyond the math lies a deeper question about the purpose of policing. Is this a wise application of law enforcement power, or does it represent a drift towards a kind of automated, zero-tolerance enforcement that criminalizes acts of petty desperation? When a police department invests in technology to catch someone stealing pocket change, it forces us to ask what we truly want our officers to be: guardians of public safety or high-tech guards for empty metal boxes. A fake pawn shop run by police seems like a straightforward way to catch thieves, but the reality is far more ethically complex. Officers would set up a storefront in a high-crime neighborhood, advertising that they would buy almost anything, no questions asked. The sign on the door promised easy cash, and undercover detectives played the parts of friendly, unscrupulous buyers. The goal was to create a magnet for stolen property, a place where burglars and petty thieves would feel safe to offload their latest hauls. And it worked exactly as planned. The store was soon bustling with activity as individuals brought in everything from stolen electronics to family heirlooms, all eagerly purchased by the police with marked bills. Arrests followed, often the moment a seller left the premises. On paper, it was a clear success, taking thieves off the street and returning stolen goods to their rightful owners. Yet a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Defense attorneys and community advocates argued that the very existence of the police-run store was actively driving crime, not just catching it. Before the sting, a potential thief might have struggled to find a reliable buyer for a stolen television, a hurdle that could have prevented the crime altogether. But the police store removed that hurdle entirely. It guaranteed a safe, convenient, and eager market for any stolen item. This created a perverse incentive. Was the operation simply arresting people who were already determined criminals, or was it effectively commissioning thefts by creating a guaranteed buyer, thereby encouraging crimes that would not have happened without the government's direct involvement? The line between catching a criminal and creating one vanished the moment the police hung out their "We buy anything" sign. Highway traffic slowed to a crawl, all because of a single, massive tractor-trailer stranded in the travel lane. Its hazard lights blinked a silent plea for help, a common and dangerous roadside emergency. But this truck was no accident. It was a meticulously planned police sting. Undercover officers had deliberately parked the broken-down rig to create a traffic bottleneck, then lay in wait. Their targets were not reckless drivers or speeding motorists. They were the Good Samaritans, the everyday people who saw a driver in distress and pulled over to offer assistance. As these helpful citizens got out of their cars, officers swooped in, arresting them for the crime of illegally stopping on a highway and impeding the flow of traffic. The police argued they were addressing a genuine safety issue, claiming that these well-intentioned stops created additional hazards, yet the public outcry was immediate and fierce. The operation felt like a profound violation of a fundamental social contract. For generations, drivers have been taught to help those in need on the road. It is an unwritten rule of shared humanity, a small act of courage in a dangerous situation. This sting turned that basic decency into a punishable offense. What message does it send when the police actively punish compassion? The people arrested were not criminals. They were neighbors and parents, the very individuals you would hope would stop if you were the one stranded on the side of the road. By criminalizing their instinct to help, the operation did more than just write tickets. It eroded a fragile thread of community trust, making the highway a little more lonely and a lot more cold for everyone. The line between law enforcement and performance art was crossed yet again when a sheriff's department decided to fight crime with a catchy playlist. Their target was not violent offenders, but unlicensed radio broadcasters, individuals operating so-called pirate radio stations without a license from the Federal Communications Commission. The typical penalty for such a crime is a hefty fine, a civil matter handled by federal regulators, but this department saw it differently. They launched their own, fully functioning pirate radio station, a complete undercover operation with a broadcast tower, professional equipment, and officers playing the part of rogue disc jockeys. The music was real, the signal was strong, and the entire production was a carefully designed lure. The plan was audacious. By becoming the most prominent illegal broadcaster in the area, they hoped to attract the attention of their competitors. The theory was that other pirate radio operators would be drawn to the new station on the dial, either to collaborate or to complain, bringing them directly into the police department's carefully laid trap. For weeks, the fake station pumped music and talk across the airwaves, all while undercover officers monitored the frequencies, waiting for their fellow outlaws to make contact. The operation culminated in a series of arrests, with individuals charged for the unlicensed operation of their own stations. On its face, it was a success, but the sheer scale of the effort raised immediate questions. An entire team of sworn officers, using sophisticated and expensive equipment, had spent months pretending to be criminals to catch other people for a non-violent offense that normally results in a paper fine from a government office in Washington. The department had essentially created a new crime scene from thin air, investing immense resources to prosecute individuals for a violation that the federal government itself rarely pursues with criminal charges. This elaborate theatrical production, complete with its own soundtrack, forces us to wonder, when police dedicate this level of creativity and taxpayer money to inventing a criminal enterprise, are they protecting the public, or are they simply putting on a show where the final act is an arrest that never needed to happen? A bait bike sits alone, its lock deliberately weakened, broadcasting its location to a waiting police van. This is the modern sting, a high-tech hunt for bicycle thieves playing out in cities across the nation. The concept is disarmingly simple. Police leave an attractive, seemingly abandoned bicycle in a public area known for high theft rates. The bike is equipped with a hidden GPS tracker, and officers monitor its signal, ready to swoop in the moment it is moved. Proponents call it a proactive and efficient tool, a direct strike against a frustrating and pervasive crime that often goes unpunished. They argue it targets active, repeat offenders and provides undeniable evidence for conviction. The success stories are compelling, with thieves caught red-handed and stolen bikes returned to their owners. Yet this seemingly straightforward tactic is mired in a deep ethical quagmire. Critics point to a fundamental flaw in the logic. Before the bait bike was placed, no specific theft was going to occur at that exact moment. The police are not just waiting for a crime, they are creating the perfect opportunity for one, placing a uniquely tempting object into an environment and waiting to see who fails the test. This is not merely catching a criminal, it is manufacturing a criminal act. The strategy also raises serious questions about justice and proportionality. The individuals caught in these stings are often not sophisticated criminal rings, but people struggling with poverty, addiction, or homelessness, for whom a seemingly unattended bicycle represents an irresistible chance. The legal consequences they face, however, can be severe, potentially leading to jail time and a permanent criminal record for a crime of opportunity that would not have existed without police instigation. Does the end of recovering a single bicycle truly justify the means of potentially altering the entire course of a person's life. The bait bike bonanza forces us to weigh the desire for crime control against the unsettling reality of a justice system that sometimes builds its own traps, then punishes the desperate for taking the bait. Even the federal government can get into the bartending business, in a convoluted operation that blurred the lines between crime fighting and regulatory overreach. Agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives opened a fully staffed fake bar. This was not a front for a drug or money laundering investigation, but a trap specifically designed to ensnare people for a paperwork violation. The sting revolved around a specific brand of alcohol, a ginger beer used to make the popular cocktail, the Moscow Mule. Undercover agents posing as bar owners and staff deliberately served the drink using the branded product without having the proper paper trail, known as a formula approval, on file with the government. They then turned their attention to other bars in the area, sending undercover agents to order the same cocktail. If a bartender served a Moscow Mule made with that particular brand, the establishment was deemed in violation, and agents would later return to issue fines or even threaten criminal charges. The entire operation was a dizzying piece of administrative entrapment. The bartenders and bar owners were not selling illegal moonshine or serving minors. They were simply making a common drink with a common ingredient, unaware they were stepping into a regulatory trap set by the very agency that wrote the rules. Critics slammed the sting as a spectacular waste of resources and a classic case of government overkill. Why were highly trained federal agents spending their time and the public's money posing as customers to catch servers in a technical violation that could have been handled with a simple warning letter or an inspection? The Moscow Mule operation forces a difficult question about the role of powerful law enforcement agencies. When they devote immense energy to creating crime for the sake of enforcing bureaucratic red tape, are they protecting the public, or are they merely proving that anyone can be made a criminal if the rules are obscure enough and the trap is perfectly set? This controversial tactic turns the oldest profession into a modern police trap. In cities across the country, female undercover officers pose as sex workers, walking known strolls or posting ads online to solicit clients. The operation seems straightforward. An officer, acting as a decoy, negotiates a price for a sexual act with a man who pulls over or responds to the ad. The moment an agreement is reached, other officers move in to make an arrest for solicitation. Police departments defend these stings as a necessary tool to combat public nuisance, human trafficking, and the exploitation associated with the sex trade. They argue they are targeting the demand side of the equation, aiming to discourage men from seeking paid sex. Yet this strategy is mired in a profound ethical and practical debate. The core legal challenge is entrapment. Defense attorneys consistently argue that the police are not merely catching willing offenders, but actively creating the crime. An officer trained in persuasion can often be the one to initiate the encounter and suggest the illegal act, potentially convincing someone who would not have otherwise sought out a sex worker. This raises a disturbing question. Is the police department identifying criminals, or are they manufacturing them by presenting a perfectly crafted, low-risk temptation? Beyond the courtroom, the tactic faces a brutal reality check regarding its effectiveness. Arresting a handful of men does nothing to address the complex root causes of sex work, such as poverty, addiction, or lack of social support. The Johns arrested are typically processed, fined, and released, often right back into the same cycle. The stings do not dismantle trafficking rings or provide pathways out for those actually being exploited. Instead, they consume immense police resources for a temporary, superficial result, while further criminalizing and stigmatizing a deeply entrenched social issue. The phantom prostitute ploy ultimately forces us to ask what true public safety looks like. Is it measured in the number of arrests made in a theatrical sting, or in the harder, longer-term work of addressing the societal conditions that fuel the sex trade in the first place. A different kind of deception was simmering on a griddle in a perfectly ordinary-looking diner. Police in one city concocted an elaborate scheme to combat insurance fraud, launching a fully operational restaurant they nicknamed the Greasy Spoon. This was no simple storefront. It was a complete working diner, open for business to the public, serving real coffee and burgers to unsuspecting patrons. Every detail was meticulously designed for authenticity, from the checkered tablecloths to the sizzle from the kitchen. But the entire establishment was a stage, and every customer was a potential actor in a crime the police were waiting to see performed. The target was a specific, costly nuisance, slip and fall fraud, where individuals would fake an accident on a business's property, then file a hefty insurance claim for their invented injuries. The police diner was engineered to be the perfect trap. Floors were kept just slippery enough, and obstacles were subtly placed, creating an environment ripe for a staged accident. Undercover officers played the parts of cooks, waitresses, and managers, all equipped with hidden cameras that captured every square inch of the dining area. The operation required immense patience and an even larger budget, running for months as officers served meals and washed dishes, waiting for the fraud to begin. And it did. Dozens of people took the bait, dramatically tumbling to the floor when they thought no one was looking, then presenting elaborate stories of their injuries to the undercover manager. Each performance was met with feigned concern and a promise to contact the insurance company, all while the entire act was recorded from multiple angles. The subsequent arrest seemed like a clear victory, a direct strike against a crime that costs businesses and consumers billions. Yet the sheer scale of the operation once again raised the question of balance. The cost of running a full-time diner for months, paying undercover officers, and maintaining round-the-clock surveillance undoubtedly ran into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. This massive investment was made to catch people committing a fraud that, while wrong, is typically a non-violent, financially motivated offense. The police had built an entire world to prove that people would lie for money, a truth that hardly required such a spectacular demonstration. This greasy spoon gambit forces us to wonder, when the government constructs an entire reality to tempt people into breaking the law, is it stopping crime? Or is it simply proving that temptation, when made irresistible, is a powerful enough force to make almost anyone fall? Even wildlife was not safe from the strange logic of undercover operations. In a rural region, game wardens devised a sting that turned a routine enforcement duty into a high-tech circular hunt. The plan began with the officers themselves breaking the law. They launched a drone, an illegal tool for hunting, and used its camera to locate and track a wild boar. Once they had the animal in their sights, they used the drone's aerial view to guide a shooter on the ground, who then killed the boar. This entire act was a felony, deliberately committed by the very people sworn to uphold the hunting regulations. But the kill was only the first step in a much larger trap. The officers then took the butchered meat and began offering it to other hunters in the area. They presented themselves as fellow outdoorsmen with a little extra venison to share, casually mentioning that the boar had been taken using a drone. Some hunters, unaware they were speaking to law enforcement, accepted the free meat. The moment they took possession of the package, they were arrested for the crime of possessing illegally taken game. The police hailed the operation as a clever way to crack down on high-tech poaching, yet the tactic felt less like law enforcement and more like a cruel game. The department had not infiltrated an existing poaching ring. Instead, they had manufactured the entire criminal enterprise from start to finish. They were the poachers, they created the contraband, and then they offered it to the public, punishing those who failed to refuse the gift. This was not a sting. It was a perfect, inescapable circle of entrapment where the state acted as both the criminal and the police. It forces a difficult question about the nature of justice itself. When the government breaks its own laws to enforce them, what moral authority does it truly hold? The ultimate phantom crime required a phantom concert. One police department, aiming to crack down on illegal ticket scalping, created an entire musical event out of thin air. They invented a popular band, designed fake posters, and even set up a convincing online presence for a show that was never, ever going to happen. The final touch was an undercover operation where officers posed as eager buyers, flooding online forums and street corners with offers to purchase tickets for this fictional performance at highly inflated prices. Their goal was to lure in real scalpers, individuals they believed were already profiteering from the ticket resale market. The logic was that by creating a high-demand event, they would attract the very criminals they wanted to catch. And the trap worked. Several people took the bait, accepting money from the undercover officers for tickets to a concert that had no venue, no date, and no band. Arrests followed for violations of local scalping ordinances, yet the entire operation rested on a bizarre and circular premise. The police had to first invent a crime that did not exist, the scalping of tickets for a non-existent event, in order to catch people for a crime that, in this specific instance, also did not exist until they created it. The scalpers who were arrested were not diverting real tickets from real fans. They were simply taking money for a fictional product in a marketplace entirely engineered by the police. This raises a perplexing legal and ethical question. Is it truly scalping if the ticket has no inherent value and the event is a complete fiction? Or is this merely a case of the government manufacturing a deceptive sales transaction purely for the purpose of making an arrest? The department argued it was a clever way to identify and prosecute individuals who were likely scalping real tickets elsewhere. But the method itself feels like a hall of mirrors where the only real crime was believing in a concert that never was. The Phantom Concert was a fiction designed for scalpers, but another federal agency preferred to build its elaborate stage in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The Drug Enforcement Administration launched an operation that has become a common and deeply controversial blueprint. They would rent an ordinary house on a residential street, a place with a manicured lawn and a two-car garage, and transform it into a fully operational drug den. Undercover agents played the parts of dealers, living in the home, answering the door, and conducting hand-to-hand sales of real narcotics to anyone who knocked. The goal was to create a reliable, under-controlled source that would attract local buyers, building cases from the ground up by tracking the customers back to their own suppliers. The house was wired with audio and video, and a surveillance team monitored every transaction from a van parked down the block. On the surface, the results seemed productive. Dozens of arrests were made, with agents seizing drugs and cash. Yet a disturbing pattern consistently emerged from these stings. The vast majority of people caught in the net were not the high-level traffickers the agency promised to target. They were low-level users, addicts, and small-time buyers, individuals purchasing tiny amounts for personal use. These stings, which consumed immense resources in rent, manpower, and operational costs, were ultimately netting the smallest fish in the pond. The ethical questions are profound. For months, a government agency was the primary drug dealer on that block, actively introducing narcotics into a community it was meant to protect. Every sale made by an agent was a real transaction, putting real drugs onto the street. While they argued it was a necessary evil to reach the top of the chain, the results often told a different story. The operation did not so much dismantle a drug network as it became one, a state-sponsored supplier that primarily punished the most vulnerable people in its own distribution chain. This safe house sting forces a difficult reckoning. When the government itself becomes the neighborhood drug dealer, even temporarily, who is really being served, and does the end of a few minor arrests ever justify the means of actively fueling the very crisis you claim to be solving? A library, the one place you expect to find quiet contemplation, became the backdrop for a morality test devised by the police. In a peculiar operation, officers selected a valuable, rare book and deliberately placed it on a public library shelf. This was not a donation, it was bait. The book was left in a prominent location, its true worth known only to the waiting officers who monitored it, waiting to see if someone would succumb to temptation. The entire setup was a trap designed to catch a thief, but the crime it was designed to prevent would not have existed without their direct intervention. Soon enough, a single individual took the book, walking out of the library with what they believed was an unguarded treasure. They were swiftly arrested for the theft. The police department framed the operation as a clever way to protect public property and apprehend a dishonest person, yet the ethical implications are deeply troubling. The police did not place the book to secure it. They placed it to tempt someone, effectively creating a crime of opportunity where none needed to occur. This was not about stopping a specific, known criminal. It was an experiment in public morality, using taxpayer resources to see who would fail a test of character. The cost of the officers' time and the planning involved was certainly far greater than the market value of the single book they used as bait. This creates a strange paradox where the guardians of public order are actively engineering scenarios of moral failure, then punishing the very failure they orchestrated. Is a library, a sanctuary for learning and trust, the appropriate place for such a deceptive game? And does catching one person justify turning a place of refuge into a proving ground for crime? The digital world offered a new frontier for police deception, moving the sting operation from the street corner directly into your pocket. One department, hunting for a specific fugitive, decided the most efficient tool was not a wanted poster but a convincing Facebook profile. They invented a completely fictional woman, crafting her with meticulous care. Her photos were attractive and seemingly genuine, her interests were relatable, and her friend list was populated with other fake accounts to create an illusion of a real social circle. This digital phantom then sent a friend request to their target, a man with an active warrant. He accepted, and a calculated online relationship began. The undercover officer behind the profile engaged him in casual, flirty conversation, slowly building trust over weeks of messages. They learned his routines, his preferences, and most importantly, his location. The ruse culminated in a plan to meet in person. When the fugitive arrived at the designated spot expecting a date, he was greeted instead by a team of waiting officers and a pair of handcuffs. On one level, it was a clean, successful arrest made without a single shot fired, but the method sent a chilling ripple far beyond that one apprehension. This was not simply monitoring a public social media feed. It was the government constructing a false digital person to manipulate, befriend, and emotionally entrap a citizen. The operation bulldozed through evolving norms of online privacy, raising a question we are still struggling to answer. Where is the line between legitimate police work and state-sponsored catfishing? If law enforcement can create a perfect, tempting lie to lure one person, what stops them from doing it to anyone they deem a person of interest? The tactic weaponizes the very human desire for connection, turning social media, a space for community, into a hunting ground. The fugitive was indeed a wanted man, but the cost of his capture was a further erosion of trust in the digital world we all now inhabit. Does the end of arresting one individual justify the means of normalizing such profound and personal deception by the authorities meant to protect us? Perhaps the most ethically stark trap of all required no fake business or digital avatar, just a small, unmarked box left on a park bench. In a public space where families picnicked and children played, police deliberately placed a container of live ammunition in plain sight. There was no note, no owner in sight, and no indication that it was part of a police operation. It was simply there, a potentially dangerous item abandoned in a community space. The officers then withdrew to a surveillance position and waited. Soon, a man noticed the box, picked it up, and took it with him. He was swiftly surrounded and arrested for theft. The police argued they were removing a hazardous material from public circulation and punishing someone for taking property that was not theirs, yet the public reaction was one of profound unease. This was not an investigation targeting a known criminal. It was a test of honesty using a dangerous object as the lure. The man arrested had not broken into a car or a home. He encountered what appeared to be lost or discarded property in a public area and made the decision to take it. By leaving the ammunition, the police created a perfect scenario of temptation, then punished a citizen for a trivial act that posed no immediate threat to anyone. The sting forced a difficult question about the role of law enforcement. Should police be in the business of planting hazards in public spaces just to see who might pick them up? The ammo box ambush felt less like crime prevention and more like a grim game, where the only winning move was to walk away from a situation the police themselves had engineered. It was a stark lesson in how a sting can transform a simple, if misguided, human action into a permanent criminal record. A car listed for a fraction of its true value is a powerful magnet for both bargain hunters and criminals. Police in multiple cities have exploited this fact, posting attractive vehicles on sites like Craigslist with a price so low it defies belief. The ad acts as a filter, designed to attract only those who would believe such a deal could exist, individuals perhaps accustomed to paying with illicit funds or narcotics instead of cash. Undercover officers, playing the part of a naive or desperate seller, would arrange meetings in parking lots, their sole purpose to see what form of payment the prospective buyer would bring. The operation's logic was that an honest person would be suspicious of the deal, while a criminal would see it as a perfect opportunity to offload stolen goods or drugs. And in several instances, the tactic worked. Individuals arrived at these meetings and offered not cash, but bundles of what they claimed were stolen electronics or bags of illegal drugs as payment for the car. The moment the offer was made, the arrest team moved in. Police departments praised these stings as a clever, modern way to remove drugs and stolen property from the streets, catching criminals who were already active in the community. Yet the strategy operates in a profound ethical gray area. The police were not responding to a specific crime wave, but creating a uniquely tempting scenario designed to appeal directly to criminal impulses. They crafted a fictional economic anomaly, a deal too good to be true, precisely because only someone engaged in illegal activity would find it credible. This raises the uncomfortable question of whether the police were identifying existing criminals or scripting a criminal transaction that would not have otherwise occurred. The line between a proactive investigation and the manufacturing of a crime hinges entirely on the mindset of the person who clicks on that ad. Does showing up with a bag of drugs prove a pre-existing intent to deal, or does it simply prove that an incredibly alluring government-created trap can sometimes succeed? The digital hunt for companionship took a far darker turn in a secluded American parking lot. Law enforcement agencies adapted a controversial British tactic known as a dogging sting, creating a scenario that tested the very limits of their authority. Officers identified a remote location, often a scenic overlook or a quiet park and dried lot, that had gained a reputation online as a meeting place for strangers seeking anonymous sexual encounters. They did not merely monitor these areas. Instead, they actively took control of the narrative, posing as participants and posting explicit invitations on the same websites and forums where these arrangements were typically made. The ads were detailed and alluring, specifying a time and place for a promised encounter. When individuals arrived driving alone to the darkened, isolated location, they were not met by a willing partner. They were surrounded by police and arrested for solicitation or indecent exposure. The legal and moral complexity of this operation is staggering. On one hand, police argued they were combating public lewdness and restoring order to a space that had been overtaken by illicit activity. They framed it as a direct response to community complaints about the area being used for such purposes. Yet the method of enforcement was deeply problematic. Unlike a traditional investigation, the police were not responding to a crime in progress. They were the architects of the entire event, from drafting the provocative advertisement to setting the stage in the empty parking lot. They created the temptation, broadcast the invitation, and then punished every person who accepted it. This raises a disturbing question about intent. Were these individuals already determined to commit a crime that night, or were they responding to a uniquely powerful and targeted lure crafted by the state? The operation did not catch people in the act of a pre-planned offense. It manufactured a criminal opportunity from whole cloth, then waited to see who would walk through the door it had opened. This dogging decoy deception forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality of a justice system that doesn't just set traps, but writes the bait with a deliberate and knowing hand. A sting can exploit financial desperation, but the ultimate deception preys on something far more profound: human grief. In a case that tested the very boundaries of undercover ethics, police launched an investigation into a psychic they believed was systematically defrauding vulnerable clients. The crime was devastating but notoriously difficult to prove, as it relied on manipulating emotions rather than physical threats. To build their case, an undercover officer had to construct a heart-wrenching lie. She posed as a woman whose sister had been murdered, a case that had long ago gone cold with no leads and no closure. Her performance was a masterpiece of emotional deception, complete with fabricated details about her sister's life, her own lingering trauma, and a desperate, palpable hope for any scrap of information that might bring peace. She went to the psychic, a person known for offering to connect the living with the dead, and pleaded for help. The officer, playing her part with devastating sincerity, laid her fictional grief at the psychic's feet. The psychic took the bait, offering to make contact with the murdered sister. Over several sessions, the psychic provided new, specific details about the fictional crime, details she claimed were coming directly from the spirit world. Each piece of information was presented as a breakthrough, a sacred message from beyond, all for a substantial fee. Of course, these revelations were not divine. They were clever fabrications, and the undercover team was recording every word, documenting how the psychic was inventing clues for a crime that had never happened. The operation culminated in the psychic's arrest for fraud. While the police celebrated a victory for justice, the victory felt hollow to many who examined the method. The department had not simply observed a crime. They had weaponized the most painful human emotion, manufacturing a fictional tragedy to tempt a psychic into crossing a legal line. This was not a victim coming forward. It was the state inventing a victim to create a crime. The ethical cost of such a deeply personal deception forces a difficult question. Does convicting one psychic for fraud justify the police role playing the most intimate kind of human suffering? And where do we draw the line when the pursuit of justice requires this level of emotional theater? The scent of freshly ground coffee usually signals a new beginning, but at one police-run kiosk, it masked the end of someone's freedom. In an operation that blurred the line between public service and public trap, a police department constructed a fully operational coffee stand, a cheerful beacon for job seekers in a community with high unemployment. The kiosk was advertised widely, promising fair wages and flexible hours, a lifeline for anyone needing honest work. Dozens of applicants, resumes in hand, lined up for interviews, hoping for a chance to pull espresso shots and serve pastries. What they did not know was that the friendly barista manager conducting the interviews was an undercover officer, and his primary goal was not to assess their customer service skills. Every application, every piece of personal information willingly provided, was immediately funneled into a law enforcement database for a warrant check. The interview process became a conveyor belt for background scans. When an applicant was found to have an outstanding warrant, often for minor, non-violent offenses like unpaid parking tickets or missing a court date for a misdemeanor, the trap was sprung. Instead of a job offer, they received a pair of handcuffs, arrested right there at the counter they hoped to work behind. The police department defended the tactic, arguing it was an efficient way to clear a backlog of warrants and ensure that individuals answered for their legal obligations. Yet the ethical violation was profound. These people were not suspects fleeing justice. They were actively seeking to reintegrate into society through lawful employment, demonstrating initiative and a desire to work. The sting exploited that very impulse, turning a pathway to stability into a direct route to jail. It created a cruel paradox where the attempt to become a productive, tax-paying citizen was the very act that triggered your punishment. This was not a drug bust or a violent crime takedown. It was an administrative roundup disguised as a jobs fair, punishing people for their past mistakes at the exact moment they were trying to build a better future. What does it say about our priorities when we arrest someone for unpaid fines at the very instant they are seeking the means to pay them? But what is the true value of something thrown away? This question lies at the heart of a sting that saw police officers become curators of garbage. In an effort to combat what they described as rampant theft from commercial dumpsters, law enforcement embarked on an operation they called the dumpster diving dragnet. They began by selecting a dumpster behind a shopping plaza, then carefully placed inside it a collection of items designed to look like valuable trash. These weren't actual discarded goods, but police property staged to appear abandoned, including electronics boxes that suggested new purchases and bags of what seemed like scrap metal. The entire setup was a carefully designed temptation, a test of the public's understanding of ownership. Officers then settled into a surveillance position and waited. One by one, individuals arrived, peered into the dumpster, and took the items left for them. As each person walked away with their newfound treasure, they were stopped and arrested for theft. The police argument was simple. This was not free-for-all garbage, but the private property of a business, and taking anything from it constituted a crime. They framed the sting as a direct strike against a nuisance that cost companies money. Yet this operation immediately plunged into a deep legal and ethical gray area. The core of the issue rests on the concept of abandonment. When a person or business throws something into a dumpster, have they truly relinquished all claim to it? The law on this is surprisingly murky and varies from one town to the next. In many places, once an item is placed in a receptacle for trash collection, it is considered abandoned and free for the taking. The police, by planting valuable-looking items, were not protecting specific property from a known thief. They were creating a philosophical puzzle, then arresting people for failing to solve it correctly. Those caught in the dragnet were not breaking into a locked storage unit. They were engaging in an activity as old as trash itself, taking what they believed was discarded and therefore ownerless. The sting forced a confrontation over the very meaning of theft. Can you steal something that has been thrown away? By using the dumpster as a trap, the police were not just enforcing a law, they were defining one on the spot, turning an act of salvage into a criminal offense based on a technicality that most people would never suspect. This dragnet did more than catch a few individuals with empty boxes. It challenged our most basic assumptions about waste, value, and the moment something truly becomes free for the taking. The sanctity of a missing child alert is one of society's most sacred trusts. We are conditioned to drop everything, to scan every face in a crowd, to feel a collective urgency when that notification flashes across our screens. But what happens when that trust is weaponized by the very institutions sworn to protect it? In one of the most ethically fraught stings ever conceived, police fabricated a missing child to capture a single fugitive. They created a fictional boy, complete with a digitally generated photo that looked heartbreakingly real, and issued a public alert through official channels. The announcement spread like wildfire across news platforms and social media, mobilizing an entire community in a shared, desperate search for a child who never existed. The department's target was a man with an outstanding warrant, a person they believed would be moved by the image and feel compelled to call the tip line with information. Their psychological calculation was chillingly precise. When the man saw the alert, he did exactly as predicted, dialing the number to offer what he claimed was a sighting. That single call was his undoing, as police instantly triangulated his location and moved in for the arrest. While the officers celebrated a fugitive captured, the public fallout was immediate and furious. Child safety advocates, legal experts, and outraged citizens asked how law enforcement could justify exploiting our deepest protective instincts for a tactical advantage. An Amber Alert system relies entirely on public faith. Its power lies in our unquestioning belief that the emergency is real and the child is in genuine, imminent danger. By creating a fictional crisis, the police didn't just lie to one man, they lied to everyone. They forced thousands of people to invest real emotion and effort into a phantom, effectively conducting a massive psychological experiment on an entire city. Every subsequent genuine alert now carries the faint, poisonous whisper of doubt. Was this a masterful bit of deception or a catastrophic breach of the social contract that safeguards our most vulnerable? The maneuver successfully jailed one man, but it risked shattering a tool that saves countless young lives. It forces a harrowing question. In the pursuit of one fugitive, is any deception permissible, even one that risks rendering future cries for help invisible to a public that can no longer trust what it sees? A new digital economy created a new kind of police trap. Officers began posing as drivers for popular rideshare apps, their personal vehicles transformed into unmarked patrol cars. The operation was simple in its execution but profound in its implications. An undercover officer would accept a ride request, pick up a passenger, and engage in casual conversation during the trip. The entire interaction, however, was a performance designed to lull the rider into a false sense of security, a private space where they might feel comfortable enough to mention an illegal substance or, through a routine check, be identified as someone with an outstanding warrant. The moment the ride concluded, if any evidence was gathered, the passenger would be met not with a 5-star rating, but with a waiting arrest team. Police departments argued this was an efficient, modern method to catch low-level offenders who were already active in the community. Yet the tactic fundamentally corrupted a basic commercial trust. When you hail a rideshare, you are entering a contract for a service, a temporary but understood bubble of privacy. The driver is a private contractor, not an agent of the state. This sting weaponized that expectation, turning a transaction built on convenience into a sanctioned deception. Passengers were not suspects under investigation. They were customers who had paid for a ride, only to find that the driver was secretly working for the police, their every word potentially used against them. This raises a disturbing question about the boundaries of consent in our daily lives. If the person driving your car, delivering your food, or serving your coffee could be an undercover officer fishing for a crime, where does legitimate investigation end and pervasive surveillance begin? The rideshare ruse did not just catch a few people with warrants. It eroded the fragile trust that holds together the gig economy, making every mundane interaction a potential test of your legal standing. Even the classic wanted poster was reinvented for the digital age, transforming a symbol of frontier justice into a sophisticated tracking device. One sheriff's department, aiming to apprehend individuals with outstanding warrants, designed and printed old-fashioned flyers featuring the faces and names of their targets. These posters were plastered around town in public spaces, looking like relics from a bygone era. The clever twist was hidden in plain sight. Each poster contained a modern QR code, accompanied by text promising a cash reward for information leading to an arrest. The department's hope was that the people they were hunting would be curious or arrogant enough to scan the code themselves, perhaps to see their own bounty or to learn what the police knew about them. The moment someone scanned that code with their smartphone, it did not lead to a website with more information. Instead, it silently pinged the sheriff's department with the scanner's precise GPS location, sending deputies racing to the spot for an immediate arrest. Law enforcement hailed the tactic as a brilliant fusion of old-school psychology and cutting-edge technology, a low-cost way to lure fugitives into revealing their own whereabouts. Yet the scheme ignited immediate alarm among privacy advocates and legal experts. This was not a passive wanted poster hoping for a tip from a concerned citizen. It was an active digital snare that exploited a person's curiosity to conduct a warrantless search of their location. The act of scanning a code in public was reframed as an act of self-incrimination, a trap that felt both clever and deeply invasive. The ethical question was stark. Does the desire to catch a fugitive justify a tactic that turns a personal device into a homing beacon without any warning or consent? This high-tech wanted poster successfully blurred the lines between innovative police work and a surveillance system that waits for its targets to tag themselves. The most elaborate police deception ever staged required a full film crew, a cast of actors, and a script worthy of Hollywood. For years, the Federal Bureau of Investigation ran a completely fictitious film festival, a multi-million-dollar production designed not to celebrate cinema, but to expose a city government rotten with corruption. They named their phantom event the Eastern Film Festival, building it from the ground up with a convincing website, professional marketing materials, and a seemingly endless budget. Undercover agents played the parts of wealthy film producers and executives, eager to bring their glamorous festival to town. Their target was a network of public officials they suspected were taking bribes in exchange for political favors and lucrative contracts. The sting's narrative was a masterpiece of temptation. The agents claimed they needed various permits, zoning approvals, and public funding to make their festival a reality. They openly discussed the need to grease the wheels, making it clear that generous consulting fees and under-the-table payments were available for any official who could smooth their path. The bait was irresistible, blending the allure of Hollywood glamour with the promise of easy money. One by one, politicians and bureaucrats took their roles in the FBI's production, accepting cash-filled envelopes in restaurants, hotels, and offices, all while hidden cameras recorded the entire performance. The operation culminated in a dramatic, sweeping round of arrests that decimated the city's political leadership. While the FBI hailed it as a landmark victory for public integrity, the sheer scale of the deception left many observers deeply unsettled. This was not a brief undercover meeting. It was a years-long, immersive fiction where the government created an entire fictional economy, complete with its own rules and rewards to tempt people into breaking the law. The line between investigator and instigator vanished entirely. The government had not just set a trap, it had built an entire world for the sole purpose of proving that the people living in it were corruptible. This forces a final, haunting question as we approach the end of our list. When justice requires a deception this vast and this expensive, who is really writing the script, and are we certain the final act is one we actually want to see? A hotel room advertised online for private parties became the last stage for our tour of police stings. This final operation, often called a honeypot sting, saw law enforcement rent a nondescript room and post a carefully worded advertisement on the internet. The listing did not explicitly mention illegal activity, but it strongly implied the space was perfect for drug use, hinting at privacy, discretion, and a no-questions-asked policy. The goal was to attract individuals looking for a safe place to consume narcotics away from public view. The police did not have to wait long. One by one, people began to arrive, paying a fee to the undercover officer at the door for access to the room. The moment they entered and began to prepare their drugs, the signal was given and they were arrested. On its surface, the operation seemed like a straightforward success, a direct strike against public drug use and the problems associated with it. Yet this classic tactic remains at the very center of a fierce, unending debate about the soul of modern policing. Is this a brilliant, proactive way to remove drugs and users from the community, or is it a predatory maneuver that creates crime simply to punish it? The police did not respond to a specific complaint about that hotel or that room. They manufactured the entire criminal scenario, from the tempting advertisement to the physical space itself. They became the landlords of a temporary drug den, then arrested their own tenants. Every individual who walked through that door was responding to a government-created invitation, a lure that would not have existed without police initiative. This forces a final, fundamental question as we conclude our countdown. When the authorities spend their resources building the perfect trap, who are they truly catching? Are they apprehending dangerous criminals who pose a constant threat, or are they simply ensnaring people whose primary crime was taking the bait in a world full of government-designed temptations? The Honey Pot Hotel, like so many stings before it, leaves us not with an answer, but with a lingering unease about the methods we sanction in the elusive and often absurd pursuit of justice. These elaborate stings are not born from a simple desire to arrest people. They emerge from a complex psychological and institutional landscape where the goal is not merely to solve crime, but to prevent it before it even happens. This philosophy is called proactive policing, a dramatic shift from the traditional model of responding to calls after a crime has occurred. The promise is alluring. Instead of being reactive, always one step behind the criminal, police can become architects of the environment, designing scenarios that control when and where crime occurs, then swooping in to stop it. It is a vision of total control, a world where law enforcement is not just a service, but an active, directing force. This mindset explains the appeal of the bait bike and the fake pawn shop. Why wait for a citizen to report a stolen bicycle when you can plant one yourself and guarantee an arrest? Why hope a burglar tries to sell goods to an informant when you can open a store and become the most reliable buyer in town? It transforms policing from a chaotic response to a managed production, where the police are the writers, directors, and starring actors. The metric for success subtly changes. It is no longer about how many crimes were solved, but how many arrests were made through these clever, self-created operations. This leads directly to the issue of resource allocation. A sting operation, no matter how absurd, generates clear, quantifiable results. A team can point to a specific number of arrests made, drugs seized, or stolen property recovered. These are powerful statistics for a police chief requesting a larger budget from city council. Contrast this with the quiet, unglamorous work of community policing, building trust and addressing the root causes of crime. How do you measure the crimes that never happened because an officer mentored at-risk youth or helped a family access social services? You cannot put that in an annual report. A $300,000 lobster sting, while financially nonsensical, produces a neat list of convictions. A patrol officer walking a beat for a year might prevent dozens of minor offenses, but that success is invisible, its story untold. This creates a powerful, often unconscious, incentive to fund the spectacular over the sustainable. Then there is the powerful human desire for the big win, the high-profile takedown. There is an undeniable allure to the elaborate conspiracy, the feeling of being a master strategist outsmarting the criminal element. Running a fake film festival for years to net corrupt politicians has a cinematic quality that writing parking tickets simply lacks. It is about playing a high-stakes game and winning. This theatrical element can sometimes overshadow the actual gravity of the crime being investigated. The goal becomes the execution of the perfect sting itself, the elegant trap, rather than the societal harm it is meant to address. This is where the line blurs dangerously into entrapment. The legal definition of entrapment is narrow, requiring that the government implant the criminal intent in the mind of an innocent person. But in the real world, the line is far fuzzier. When police create a fake strip club and spend years as its proprietors, are they uncovering criminal intent or cultivating it? When they pose as lone sharks preying on the desperate, are they catching predators or becoming them? The psychology of the sting creates a paradox. The more clever, alluring, and perfectly engineered the trap, the more it risks manufacturing the very criminality it claims to be fighting. We are left to wonder if these operations truly protect us, or if they simply satisfy a deep-seated institutional craving for control, for measurable results, and for a story that ends with a dramatic arrest, no matter the cost to justice itself. This erosion of trust is not a theoretical problem. It has tangible, chilling consequences in the very neighborhoods police are sworn to protect. When a community learns that the ice cream truck was a surveillance operation or that a job offer was a warrant check, a fundamental social contract is broken. The police are no longer seen as guardians, but as manipulators, as architects of temptation who view every citizen as a potential suspect waiting to fail a test. This perception fuels a corrosive us versus them mentality, where cooperation evaporates and witnesses become reluctant to come forward. Why would you confide in an officer or report a crime if you fear the entire interaction could be an elaborate performance designed to entrap you or someone you know? This breakdown doesn't just make police work harder, it makes entire communities less safe as the flow of vital information from the public to the authorities slows to a trickle. The fallout from these absurd stings often extends far beyond the courtroom, sparking public outrage and loud, persistent calls for reform. Citizens begin to demand greater transparency and strict oversight, questioning how their tax dollars are being spent and under what ethical guidelines. They ask for clear rules limiting the scope of undercover operations, ensuring that police power is used to investigate serious threats, not to manufacture petty crimes. The debate shifts from whether a sting was clever to whether it was just, forcing a painful but necessary reckoning with what we truly want from our justice system. Do we want a police force that excels at setting traps, or one that earns trust through consistent, honorable service? The answer to that question will define the future of public safety far more than any phantom Ferrari or fake film festival ever could. From fake universities to phantom Ferraris, these 33 stings reveal a strange and often controversial side of American law enforcement. We have seen police become loan sharks, ice cream vendors, and even pirate radio disc jockeys, all in the name of justice. This journey through the looking glass forces us to confront a difficult question. Where exactly does clever, proactive policing end and absurd, costly overreach begin? The answer is not a simple line on a map, but a shifting, gray area that challenges our very definition of public safety. Each sting, from the $300,000 lobster trap to the federal government's years-long management of a strip club, represents a calculated gamble. The gamble is that the ends, a handful of arrests, will somehow justify the means, a profound investment of public funds and a deep erosion of community trust. As viewers, you are now the jury. We want to hear your verdict. Which of these 33 operations struck you as the most unbelievable, the most creative, or the most ethically troubling? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this deep dive into the bizarre facts of America compelling, be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the unexpected stories that shape our world.